Hello friends, welcome back to Aunt Debbie's Boutique. I thought after a couple of weeks of slaving over a quilt, you might be ready for a short, quick, and easy pattern. I had somebody reach out to me in my Etsy shop and ask for a pillowcase pattern that had the little envelope pocket here that will keep your pillow from falling out. I believe this is called an English envelope pillowcase, I believe. And this person that reached out to me was from Australia, and apparently that's what they use over there all the time. So I developed this pattern, and it's a roomy pillowcase. I like a little room in my pillowcases. So if you like yours to fit real tight, you could take it up another inch. I mean, you could cut it down another inch on the sides. But I'm going to give you the dimensions for this particular pillowcase that I've made. I'm going to have a pattern in a few days in my Etsy shop, and it will have dimensions for all different size pillows: queen pillows, king pillows, body pillows, all sizes. I haven't got that all figured out yet, but I'll have the dimensions for all of them in that pattern too. The pattern will run $3, but the first week, I believe it is, that it goes up, there's a 25% discount. So you might want to check AuntDebbiesBoutique.com if you're interested in getting this pattern. Okay. I will give you the dimensions on how to make this one today. What you're going to need is 1 yard of fabric for your main body. And then you're going to need a strip that is 10 inches wide for your border, and it needs to be half of the width of fabric. So in other words, you could take a 10-inch strip by the width of your fabric and cut it in two, and you could make 2 pillowcases with that. The same is true of the flange, the little decorative piece on there. It's 2 inches by the width of your fabric, and then you have enough for 2. Now what I want to show you, the reason I didn't have this all cut out ahead of time is there's something kind of important about when you cut out the fabric. Do you see how sometimes fabric comes to you and it's got this nice crease here, but it doesn't meet over here at the edges? We need, before we cut out our pillowcase, we need to square that up. So I've got a little over a yard here, yard and an inch or something, just so I have plenty. And I want to square that up, and I want to re-iron in my crease over here. Because we want to get this. We need every inch of this if we want the loose fit pillowcase, like regular pillowcases are loose fit like that. Well, it's hard to do this on this small ironing board. Maybe if I turn it this way. Yeah, that'll be better. So I've got those 2 ends lined up, and I'm going to re-iron my crease. I mean, it's off as much as an inch in some places on here. And I'm just going to iron this all real good while I'm at it. Okay, now, not only will we have the maximum width for our pillowcase, but our fabric will be straight of grain doing it this way. Okay, I want to make sure I have exactly a yard. The way I'm going to do this is fold it in half and just measure over 18 inches. And trim off both sides at the same time. I'll make sure I've got that straight there. Okay, now we have one other issue we need to address, and that's our selvage. So I like to cut off about a ½ inch. You can cut off as much as of an inch, and it depends on how wide your fabric was printed as to how much you have left. I'm going to cut off 3/4 of an inch here. And that will get all the selvage on both sides. Usually one side of your selvage is a little longer than the other. Okay. Now we have our perfectly cut yard of fabric. Now I want to mention here, once again, I'm using a directional print. And that's because I just happen to have a lot of directional prints in my stash. This was left over from when I used to teach kids sewing all the time. It was prior to COVID, but for years I taught kids sewing classes, and I always cut everything out for them and provided it in my classes. And I did that through churches and through a community center here. So I do have quite a bit of kids fabric laying around, and I'm just trying to use what I've got. Obviously these frogs are going to run up and down on my pillowcase, and I'm fine with that. If you want yours to run this way, it's gonna take more fabric, and you're gonna have to cut it. You'll only get one piece instead of two out of this yard of fabric. And I will compute how much fabric it takes if you want to cut it that direction. I have not done that, but I will do it, and it'll be included in my pattern. Okay, the next thing we want to do, I've got this flipped wrong, is we want to cut this in half right where we ironed that crease. I hope it's in the viewing area there. Okay, one of these is going to be the front and one's the back. I'm going to lay the back aside for now. And I'm going to take and cut down the front to 24 inches. So I am going to line this up on my cutting board. Nice and square, and use my straight edge and my blade to cut this off at 24 inches. And this you can put aside for something else. This is not anything we're going to need. Okay, so basically both of our pieces are half of the width of our fabric minus our selvage. That comes out on this particular print to be about 21.5. Now, if you want your pillowcase a little tighter fitting, you could cut that back to about 20, but I wouldn't cut it any more than that. But I want mine a little bit looser. It's easier to get the pillow in and out, and that's the way conventional pillowcases are. They're a little looser fit. Okay, the same thing is true for our 10-inch strip. I've already cut the selvages off of this because I used the other half of it to make my first pillowcase. I'm making a match set. So if you want to make 2 pillowcases, you'll need 2 yards of fabric, and you'll need a 10-inch strip and a 2-inch strip of your contrasting ones. And I'm going to trim this down till it's about 21.5 also. And this one was a little shorter than the other ones, but I've got just barely 21.5 on it, so that's going to work out just fine. Okay, the first thing we want to do is take our back, and I'm going to lay it out, just moving stuff around all the time here. I'm going to lay it out so I can tell that this is the top, and this is going to be the top of my pillow. I am going to iron over a 1/2 inch and then a 1/2 inch again, and we're going to iron that and then stitch it in place because it's going to be our hem for our little pocket. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this particular construction technique is going to leave you with no exposed seams. Everything is going to be enclosed, and that just gives it a little more professional look, and it'll hold up longer and all that. You do not we're going to do French seams, and you don't have to do that if you want. My pillowcase pattern, my just standard one in my Etsy shop, which happens to be my best-selling pattern, which just floored me. But anyway, it is. It just has basic techniques because it's meant for total beginners. I use that pattern for children all the time. So this will be a little more involved, but it's still easy enough for a beginner to do. Maybe not as much for a child, but okay. Now that I've folded that over a 1/2 inch, I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm going to just stitch that in place. So let's go do that. Now that we've got that hem sewed in, we're just going to give it a nice steam press and lay it aside. Okay, for the front, I want to make sure I have my top. And we want to take our flange, which is 2 inches wide, and just fold it in half. And this is an optional piece. I just love mixing fabrics, and so I like to have as many fabrics as I can in something. And if you have trouble picking things that go together at your local fabric store, they usually have a whole line of fabrics that coordinate and go together, so it makes it a whole lot easier. All right, across the top of our pillowcase, we're going to lay this flange, lining up our raw edges. Then we're going to lay our 10-inch strip. Sorry, there's a muscle car outside making lots of noise. And I'm going to pin this all the way across, making sure that I have 4 selvages here. I have the selvage, or the raw edge, I should say, the raw edge of our 10-inch piece. I've got 2 raw edges of our 2-inch piece, and I've got the raw edge of our 24-inch piece. And I really like to go just like I did on quilts, put the first pin in and the last pin in and kind of stretch it. Take that one out because I got ahead of myself. And find the middle. Make sure nothing is slid down like that little flange did. And this kind of ensures that your seams will everything will be even on the edges. Okay, now I'm going to take this over my machine and I am going to stitch, let's see, a 3/8 inch seam across here. Okay, now that we've got that done, we're going to do something that's called the burrito method. I want to take my body of my pillowcase, the front, and I'm going to roll it up like a burrito. And I'm going to continue to roll it. I'm going to just peel that back and roll it all the way to the top. Then I'm going to bring this back over it, flip it over, and bring this around so that my seam, my raw edges on this side line up. So the body of our pillowcase is totally enclosed inside of the border of our pillowcase. And I'm going to pin it just like I did before. But I'm going to pin it from this side because I want to see my stitching that I did before, and I want to stitch as close as possible right on top of that. And if I get off, I want to get off this direction away from the seam. That way it'll cover our first seam. We don't want our first seam showing through, so we want to either be right on top of it or just a hair to this side of it. I hope that makes sense. Now I want to take it over the sewing machine and once again stitch right on top of it or a hair to this way. You want to make sure your little burrito roll in here is not too close to your seam that you catch any of it. So let's go do that. now that that is stitched, we want to reach inside and pull out this piece we rolled up, and in the process it's going to turn our border piece right side out. And there is our border and our flange piece, and everything is nice and neat. And look at the back side, you can't see the seam, it's all enclosed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iron this all up on the back side. I'm not going to put any steam on it just yet because I want to make sure I get the front side lined up. Flip it over to the front. Iron that up away from the flange. Then I'm going to steam it real good and put a crease in it. This would look real pretty too with a piece of lace if you were making a fancy pillowcase, not with frogs. But you could also overlay a piece of lace on this, just sandwich it in, laying it face down on your flange in between, and then when you turn them right side out, you can tack down the other edge of your lace. Okay, that's the hardest part. Now then, since I don't have an ironing board here big enough to lay it all on, we're going to see if we can do this without too much problem. Let me kind of shove my ironing board over here to the edge because I'm going to need it in a little bit. So I'm going to lay out the front of my pillowcase. Then I'm going to lay the back of my pillowcase right on top of it, face down. And get all my corners lined up as best I can. As we learned in quilting, that's not always perfect, just the best we can get it to lay. Then I'm going to turn this back until it lines up perfectly with the front. And I'm going to do a little bit of finger press. That wasn't quite. Okay, I'm going to measure this, but it should be somewhere between 6.5 and 7 inches, about that. Mine's exactly 6.5. 6.5. Okay, now this is where I want to slip my ironing board back in here and iron that in place. Now, I didn't just tell you to fold down 6.5 inches or 7 inches because it varies. It varies according to the seam allowance you've taken and all that. So we just want it to line up with our front. Okay. At this point, you could just seam it up and be done with it, but we're going to do French seams, or at least I'm going to show you how to do French seams so that all our seams are enclosed. So to do a French seam, we're going to do wrong sides together. So I'm putting the wrong side of the back down and putting the wrong side of the front right on top of it. And once again, they should line up, make them line up here at the top. If you're off at all, you want it to be at the bottom because we can just trim that. And there's plenty of forgiveness in this pattern, in that if your seam is too big, the pillow is still going to fit in there. Or if you're shy a half of an inch with your fabric, it's all going to be okay. Okay, I'm going to pin this all the way around. And then as soon as I get it pinned, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Now that it's pinned real good, I'm going to go stitch it. So if you'll join me at the sewing machine. Okay, now that we've put that 1/4 inch seam, we want to trim this. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we should be back stitching at the beginning and ending of every seam. This is not like quilting, which seams are going to be added on top of it, so we don't want it to pull apart. But I want to trim this seam now to 1/8 of an inch. And that's just because we're going to turn this inside out and sew it again. And we don't want any of this edge of this seam sticking out. If you don't have one of these for your wool pressing mat, they're wonderful. I got this at Missouri Star Quilts, and it just cleans off your wool mat, just called a wool mat cleaner or something like that. Okay, we've got that trimmed down. Now I want to turn it wrong side out. I did clip my corners also. Now, we're going to take another seam all the way around, and you can see why we wanted this one trimmed down, because we want it enclosed. And I find the best way to make sure you catch everything right is to iron it from this side. And so you have your crease right where your seam is, and then your seam doesn't get lopsided and you end up catching or some of the previous seam showing through. I've had some people ask about my iron. Sure gets dirty sitting over here. And it's a Rowenta Perfect Steam Pro. I absolutely love it. It's got a fill tank that it's attached to by a hose. And it is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay. Now that I've got that ironed in, I'm going to go back over to the sewing machine and I'm going to take a 3/8 inch seam all the way around. So that should give us plenty of leeway to not catch ours, for our seam to not be sticking out, because we trimmed it to 1/8. So if we do a 3/8 inch, you should miss it so that nothing sticks out. And just make sure you keep your seam rolled to the edge as you're sewing. Okay, let's go do that and we'll be done. Okay, now that we've done our 3/8 inch seam, let's turn it right side out. And let's check around our seams and see if any of our previous seam is showing through. If it is, just go back and take a little wider seam. This pattern is very forgiving. Now, if you were making a little girl's dress and that happened, you were doing French seams on that, which is a common thing to do on nice children's clothing, and your seam was sticking out, you need to rip it out and trim your seam a little better or something, because if you take a wider seam, that dress may not fit. But this pillowcase doesn't fit like a dress does. It's much looser. Okay, let's iron it and admire our work. Sometimes it's easiest to iron it like this first. Okay, if you get your creases ironed in, steamed in real good like that, when you wash it, if you take it out of the dryer hot, you can just shake it out and fold it, and your creases will stay in there nice and neat, and you won't have to iron them back in. Not that you would anyway, but I mean, I don't iron my pillowcases. So, okay. Well, before I fold it up, see our nice little pocket? When we put our pillow in there, let me show you on this one. You slide your pillow all the way down, then you pull this pocket up over your pillow. Now, if the pillow, this is particularly good for kids, if the pillow gets turned upside down and pulled on, it won't come out. This is not a pillow sham, it's a pillowcase, and so that's why I kept it loose. But if you want yours to be more like a pillow sham and you want it tighter, you can just, like I said, cut another inch. Instead of it being 21.5, you could go down as far as 20 inches on the side. Okay. That completes our project for today. I hope you have enjoyed this. Face it towards you. Hope you've enjoyed this and learned something new today. I am working behind the scenes on a couple of more quilting series, but in the meantime, I'm going to try to offer up a few short videos like this with short, quick projects. Our next one, if I can get my pattern perfected in time, will be a Valentine's Day table runner. So, and I'll probably only be posting a couple times a week until we get another series going. And even then, I don't think they're going to be as long as the one that we just completed. So, okay. Thank you for joining me today. If you would, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Whatever you can do, it helps me to grow this channel. And remember, whatever you do, do it to the glory of the Lord. Thank you.